Welcome to the UVM Podcast, place where we discuss all things related to tree and power line conflicts. No outages, no fires, and no one gets hurt. That's our motto here, and that's our opening. With our opening, I'd like to turn it over and say, welcome, Nick. How are things across the pond?
Hey, Steve. Yeah, pretty good, thanks. Yeah, excited for today's episode because it's the first time that we've recorded both audio and video. We've been doing the podcast now in a audio-only format since 2021. So, yeah, good 4 years and first foray into video.
Well, I remember discussions early on saying that should we post this on YouTube? And the discussions were, well, no, Steve, I don't think people want to look at your face. It's enough. They have to listen to your voice all the time. So we initially started strictly with audio, but now we're recognizing that we're going to have to reach out to the YouTube audience too. A lot of folks spend a lot of time on YouTube, and some of them may enjoy some of the videos we're going to be posting. And speaking of which, maybe you can tell us, who do we have as our first video or inaugural video?
Yeah, so and I'll add to that as well that after my kids thought you were Santa Claus, we can bring magic to people around the world now with this video.
Merry Christmas, Nick. Merry Christmas
to you too, mate. So this is our first episode is from something that we've did recently, the Grid Resilience Summit. You and I were the hosts of, Steve, and actually this is one of a string of live events that we've done at conferences and through sort of online webinars for UNA and others. So it sort of makes sense that we make our video content available as well as the audio stuff as well. So what the Grid Resilience Summit was a event put on by LiveEO. I work as my day job. And what they did was they brought together some speakers from across the industry to talk about all things related to grid resilience. So grid modernization, wildfires, storm events. It was really sort of content-rich summit that took place over half a day.
Agreed, yeah.
And LiveEO has said that, as we're the hosts of that particular summit, they're happy for me to share the content over, the UVM podcast. So that's really great. So what we're going to do is serialize the summit. There's 6 distinct sessions. And the first today is with Director Caroline Thomas Jacobs from the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety in California, or Energy Safety for short. And you recall, Steve, she's actually the first person that we interviewed for the launch of the UVM podcast. So it's kind of nice that coming full circle, with now the launch of our video channel today.
Yeah, I'm assuming we're also going to be posting our audio podcasts on this particular site, because a lot of people actually, if they have YouTube open up on their computer, they can listen to these former episodes. And I highly recommend, as you mentioned, the first one we did with Caroline. It was an exceptional first episode as far as we were concerned. And I think her keynote speech at the Resilience Summit was great too. So I guess with that, we'll go ahead and start that video, Nick.
Yeah, here we go. So here is Caroline Thomas Jacobs.
All right. Everyone should see me and Caroline now. Thanks, Nick, and Steve for the opening and the handover here as well. Please, as Nick said, make sure to use the chat and also the Q&A section during the presentation. If you can hear me and see me or us loud and clear, basically, let us know in the chat as well so that there aren't any technical difficulties. All right. So as Nick and Steve have mentioned it before, I think there are some challenges, but there is also hope, obviously, when it comes to grid resilience, wildfires, extreme events in general. And I would argue we've definitely seen both in California in the past years. I've seen a lot of people in the audience being from that region. You definitely know there were some severe weather events, wildfires, but also a shift, I would argue, in how both utilities and the regulatory side of things are addressing these big challenges. And I'm very excited that Caroline Thomas Jacobs is joining me today on stage. She is the director of the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety for the state of California. Again, if you are from that region, you probably know her. If not, definitely make sure to listen what she has to say, both about the regulatory model that is quite unique and new in California, but also how utilities are benefiting from it. But I would argue not only utilities, but also obviously communities and cities. So if you're tuning in from Europe or from the East Coast, this is definitely an interesting session for you as well. So with that being said, welcome on stage, Caroline.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Thank you, Patrick, for that warm introduction. And thank you all for being here today. Whether you represent a regulator, a utility, or a vendor, your presence here is a powerful reminder that our energy future is not being shaped in isolation, but through collaboration, commitment, and community. So today, I want to talk about the shared mission that brings us all together. Building a safer, cleaner, and more resilient grid. I'll walk you through how the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety, Energy Safety, we call ourselves, in California has approached tackling the utility wildfire problem, how our efforts fit into California's ambitious clean energy and forest and wildfire resilience goals, and maybe most importantly, where I see us headed. So let's begin by acknowledging the reality. California, the West, and much, if not all, of the nation stands at a critical juncture in how we ensure a safe, reliable, and affordable electric system in a changing climate with increasing weather extremes. We're experiencing firsthand the devastating effects of a changing climate, especially here in California, longer wildfire seasons, historic droughts, record-breaking heat waves, increasingly extreme weather patterns, and our most vulnerable communities are disproportionately affected, and the risks are continuing to grow. At the same time, we are undergoing a historic transformation in our energy system, moving away from fossil fuels, expanding renewable energy, electrifying transportation and buildings, facing extreme load growth to power an AI-enabled economy, and upgrading infrastructure to serve a decarbonized 21st century grid. But this transportation brings challenges. The same power lines that deliver clean energy can also spark catastrophic fires. The same infrastructure we rely on to power our lives must now be hardened and modernized and rebuilt for a changing climate. So energy safety was literally born from the ashes of the utility-caused fires of 2017 and 2018 in California. Those fires killed over 100 people and destroyed more than 25,000 structures. So we were established in 2020 to address the growing wildfire threat posed by electrical infrastructure. And in January of 2022, we took on the additional mission of excavation safety, specifically the Call Before You Dig program, or 811. If you're here in the US, you probably know it as that. As a relatively new but rapidly evolving office under the California Natural Resources Agency, our mission is clear: to create a safer, more resilient California by reducing excavation and wildfire risks, advancing sustainable practices, and ensuring California infrastructure adapts to a changing climate. So under our wildfire mission, which I'll focus my comments on here today, energy safety is the state's lead entity for reviewing and approving wildfire mitigation plans submitted annually by electric utilities. These plans lay out how utilities understand their wildfire risk and how they plan to reduce that risk, such as enhancing their vegetation and asset inspections and maintenance, changing how they operate the grid, hardening their system. And in addition to evaluating wildfire mitigation plans, energy safety conducts annual safety culture assessments, ensures utility executive compensation structures meet regulatory minimums to include safety performance metrics in incentive plans. And probably most importantly, we oversee utilities' implementation of their plans. We make sure utilities are doing the work they committed to do in their approved plans through audits and field inspections. But our role goes beyond compliance. The regulatory framework we were created to implement was purposely created to incentivize utilities to quickly make impactful investments in safety. There was a recognition that the traditional model did not allow for the amount or the speed of investment required to catch up with the risk on the system. And there was a recognition that utilities would need to develop new capabilities to understand and address that risk. And developing new capabilities requires learning quickly. So the core purpose of our annual and persistent performance oversight is to facilitate this continuous improvement. We are not the traditional regulator who sets minimum standards and then penalizes if those are violated. Our intent is to foster learning. California utilities had to learn how to understand their wildfire risk around their equipment and explore ways to address it. So we hold them accountable to learning these lessons and developing these capabilities, but while supporting them to meet increasing high standards. We also maintain transparency and public trust by making sure that these processes are open, data-driven, and aligned with California's broader climate and forest resilience goals. So when we began this journey over 5 years ago, I knew there were two things that we needed to have any hope of addressing the utility wildfire problem. First, data. A key component of California's new wildfire safety requirements in 2020 was that utilities had to submit performance metrics to justify and prove their mitigations were making a difference. So when utilities submit a plan, they must not only explain what they're doing, but they must show how it's reducing their risk. So we now have sophisticated data requirements that we have developed over the past 5 years. And more importantly, the utilities have built the enterprise IT systems to collect, analyze, and use these data to prioritize mitigation and make decisions. I had one utility executive share with me early on in our journey that she had no idea how much addressing wildfire risk would mean investing in their IT infrastructure. So using these data, we can now see that wildfire mitigation investments targeted in California's defined high fire threat districts, HFTD, so those of you from California know that we organize ourselves and define ourselves that way, have decreased specific types of ignitions. For example, total HFTD reportable ignitions in 2024 were down 18% over the 7-year average and down 34% over 2020, the most recent year with similar fire weather to 2024. So prior to WMP data requirements, there simply wasn't a shared understanding of how to measure what the risks were, nor how to measure the impact of the mitigations. So the second foundational concept for me going into implementing California's framework was innovation. So I know I'm speaking to an audience of a lot of veg management folks, but it was clear to me from the outset that utilities weren't going to be able to cut their way out of the wildfire problem. They were going to have to innovate their way out. And so they have begun to do so. Over the past 5 years, California has made significant strides in developing the specific wildfire capabilities to improving their wildfire grid resilience. So guided by our decisions on their plans and the areas of continued improvement that we include in each of those decisions, electric utilities have invested billions in grid safety. They've hardened thousands of miles with covered conductor, undergrounding, and in some locations, line removal and microgridding. They've added tens of thousands of new components and remote sensing devices to operate the grid in more surgical and sophisticated methods, deployed advanced technologies such as LiDAR and satellite imagery to enhance their veg and asset management practices, utilized artificial intelligence for risk modeling and enhanced inspections, piloted new technologies and used old technologies in new ways, and probably most significantly, they've evolved their organizational structures and their ways of working to fundamentally consider fire risk in everything that they do. They're doing all of this to reduce exposure in high fire risk areas. So I regularly go out in the field to observe the work utilities are doing around wildfire risk. I want to meet the frontline workers who are doing the work and hear directly from them. And I've had lots of enlightening interactions over the last several years, but 2 particular field visits have left a really strong impression with me. One was back in 2022. I was observing a new asset inspection process that this utility was doing. And the local supervisor, who was your typical grizzled 40-year veteran lineman who'd moved up through the ranks to be a supervisor, he'd been working and inspecting the same district his entire career. And I asked him, I was like, what do you think about all this new work you're being asked to do and do it in different ways? And he looked at me and he said, for the first time in my career, I'm finally allowed to inspect the poles I know are the riskiest in my local district. And he said, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've seen more change in the last few years than I have in all the rest of my career combined. And it's good change. And then more recently, just in the past year, I was meeting directly with some, again, frontline linemen to discuss safety culture. Specifically, I wanted to hear how they provided feedback and did they feel listened to. And again, another veteran lineman, been doing this for 30, 40 years. And he said he's in the past had shared feedback that he had provided in years past to improve worker safety, but it always came at the cost of production. And so he never saw that feedback being incorporated into what they were being directed to do. But he says now he's empowered to make decisions to protect his workers while at the same time, even if it's at the cost of time. He said a really significant cultural change for what he's been experienced in his career. So I want to be clear, however, more change needs to happen, and it needs to happen quickly. The January fires in LA are a sober reminder that the fire threat is persistent, and we need to change fast. Under energy safety's oversight, wildfire mitigation plans have become more sophisticated, measurable, and performance-based, and the focus is now shifting from activity-based compliance to risk reduction outcomes. But we cannot be complacent. The wildfire threat is evolving faster than our systems are designed to handle. Climate conditions, once considered extreme, are now the norm. And it's important to acknowledge that wildfire resilience is not only a utility issue, it's a whole of society imperative. So to that end, energy safety has integrated our utility regulatory work into California's Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force. So the task force was created by Governor Newsom in 2021 to align the activities of federal, state, local, public, private, and tribal organizations to support wildfire and forest resilient projects tailored to the unique priorities and risks of each region across California. So to date, the task force has invested nearly $6 billion on forest health and wildfire resilience projects and increased treatments to more than 700,000 acres annually, including a doubling in acres treated specifically with prescribed fire, with a goal to reach 1 million acres treated. They've also streamlined approvals of projects through large-scale use of exemptions and the development of the California Vegetation Treatment Program, CalVBT. So these investments are making a difference. So, for example, this summer, the Tiger Creek fuel break helped minimize the impacts of an August fire called the Tiger Fire, which burned approximately 1,200 acres. The fuel break kept flames on the ground, enabling Cal Fire crews to quickly contain the fire. So it was a 300-acre fuel reduction project located on Bureau of Land Management lands in a high wildfire risk area. And it created a buffer in a steep river canyon between the community and the fire, providing firefighters safe access to keep the fire from burning up the canyon and into the community. And it also protected PG&E's hydroelectric and transmission infrastructure and the San Francisco Bay East Bay's residents' water sourced from the Mokelumne River. So the pre-fire planning and investment among multiple partners in this particular project demonstrates how wildfire intensity can be reduced to safeguard homes, power, and utility infrastructure. The task force has defined an action plan, including 25 specific deliverables for 2025. One of those deliverables, action item number 10, is led by energy safety, and it's to develop a utility wildfire resilience partnership program with the intent to facilitate coordination between utilities, government, and community-based organizations to align utility corridor investments with adjacent landscape and community projects. So the purpose is to amplify the impact of each investment through landscape scale coordination. And this is all modeled off of an existing collaboration. Liberty Utility up in our Tahoe Basin, so that's up in Lake Tahoe for those of you outside California, the Liberty Utilities contributed to a power line resiliency corridor project. The project was implemented as a partnership between the U.S. Forest Service, Tahoe Conservancy, and Liberty Utilities to coordinate fuels reduction treatments in the Tahoe Basin in order to amplify the impacts of any one project, again, through that landscape scale coordination. The treatments reduced the likelihood of utility ignition, and it protected power lines from passing wildfire through shaded fuel breaks. So our work group that we're leading will release a strategic plan by the end of this year through the task force, the California Wildfire Task Force, providing guidance on how to support project partnerships like the Liberty Utility Partnership and share data and funding and pilot projects to improve forest resilience to protect power reliability, power assets, communities, and the natural environment. So these climate resilience investments are aligned with California's nation-leading clean energy goals, which include powering California on 100% clean electricity by 2045, reducing greenhouse gas emissions to 40% below 1990 levels by 2030 and meet climate neutrality by 2045. And while California has already surpassed 2 million zero-emission vehicles sold, California is aiming for 100% sales by 2035. These goals require a massive build-out of clean energy infrastructure. Utility scale solar, wind, long-duration storage, transmission expansion, distributed energy or generation. So how's California doing towards these goals? In 2023, California was powered by 2/3 clean energy, the latest year for which data was available. It's the largest economy in the world to achieve this level of clean energy. This year, California has run on 100% clean energy for some part of the day, almost every day this year. But building this new energy future on top of aging infrastructure prone to wildfire isn't sustainable. We must integrate resilience into our decarbonization efforts from the beginning. So through all these state initiatives, energy safety is working closely with the California Energy Commission, California Public Utilities Commission, CAL FIRE, and others to ensure that utility wildfire risk is embedded into all aspects of energy, forest, and wildfire planning and investment. And any conversation about California's energy future must center on equity. Too often, the communities facing the greatest wildfire risks, indigenous communities, farm worker towns, low-income and rural communities, have the least access to backup power and the fewest resources to evacuation and recovery, and the least influence over utility decision-making. And as we all know, energy costs have increased significantly. So to address this affordability crisis and equity issue, Governor Newsom has signed into law a sweeping energy package. The legislation lowers customer energy costs, improves utility wildfire safety oversight, protects customers from utility wildfire liabilities, accelerates clean energy development, and extends the state's carbon emission cap and trade, now called Cap and Invest program. But no single agency, utility, or jurisdiction can do this alone. California's resilience depends upon unprecedented coordination across agencies, alignment of state and local policies, active participation from communities, businesses, and tribal nations. So energy safety is continuing to collaborate with CAL FIRE on fire prevention and response, the California Public Utilities Commission on utility cost recovery and enforcement, local government on utility coordination and community preparedness, academic institutions and national labs on risk modeling and innovation. Energy safety serves as a hub, translating technical utility plans into public outcomes, policy into practice, and oversight into risk reduction. So here's what the future must look like. A grid that is climate ready, able to handle heat waves, floods, wildfires without widespread outages and danger to the public. A clean energy system that is resilient by design, incorporating microgrid, storage, demand-side tools into every community. A utility sector that is accountable, transparent, performance-driven. An oversight system that is predictive, not reactive, based on data, risks, and continuous learning. So the energy package signed by the governor earlier this month has laid out the next steps for California to realize this future. Senate Bill 254 aligns the wildfire mitigation plans with utilities' general rate cases to more effectively manage costs. It expands the wildfire fund to another $18 billion and protects ratepayers from costs on utilities' first $6 billion in wildfire-related upgrades. It allows for public financing of infrastructure projects and accelerates clean energy development through streamlined permitting. Assembly Bill 1207 and 840 bolsters California's ambitious leadership in lowering climate pollution while growing its economy by extending the state's carbon emission cap and trade, as I've said, is now called Cap and Invest program by 2040 to 2045. At Energy Safety, we've re-energized our focus on facilitating our wildfire risk modeling working group. So we continue to work on maturing utility risk modeling and developing more consistent approaches to how we understand risk and measure utility wildfire risk. We're incorporating community vulnerability into the risk modeling and climate forecasts into the risk modeling. We're building upon the study that we required of California utilities on vegetation clearance effectiveness to explore utility veg management best practices. So we initially required this study back in 2021, and over the last several years, utilities have developed common data attributes, consolidated data into a centralized database, and this past March included the final results of the study in their submitted 26-28 Wildfire Mitigation Plans, which you can find on our website. We're now thinking about ways to leverage this shared data to inform and improve utility veg management practices. So California has the tools, the policy frameworks, and the public will to make all this happen. But we must remain clear-eyed about the scale of the challenge, and we must move faster than the escalating risks. So I leave you with this. Wildfires and climate change are not abstractions. They are lived realities for millions of Californians and Americans. Clean energy and wildfire and forest resilience are not luxuries. They are necessities for us to thrive and prosper. Our oversight and safety are not burdens. They are the foundation of a trustworthy, equitable, and affordable energy system. So let's build that foundation together with urgency and with integrity, and with a deep commitment to protecting the people and places that we all call home. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much already for the keynote. I think everyone here was listening closely. The first few questions are coming in already, and I think we have 8 or 9 minutes. So please, everyone, use the Q&A section. I'm also able to show them on stage. And the first question is from Larry, and I think, Larry, you're on the fireside chat right after this session, but you're still engaged here. So, Caroline, you've probably read it by now.
I did. So yeah, we it's a really good question, and it comes up a lot. So I work a lot with, at this point, other state utility regulators, because they all are looking not to necessarily copy what we're doing, because to the sort of the foundation of your question is California has some resources that other states don't have, so not everything is going to be able to fit in the same way. I can't answer the question for other states, or other countries for that matter, of whether they would want to separate our particular work from their PUC, but I can speak to what the intent was here in California and what we've learned from it. So the goal here was, we all recognized that there needed to be a hyper focus on utility wildfire risk to really expedite fundamentally the cultural and organizational change that was required to truly integrate fire risk into how utilities build, operate, and maintain their grid. So the reality of the existing traditional regulatory model didn't necessarily lend itself to the same level of laser focus without all the complexities of the other considerations, and the speed of impact. So we were separated out. And I think that we've seen, as I mentioned in my comments, that we have seen a pretty expedited investment and, more importantly, cultural change. Again, it's not all done. Nobody's perfect. We're always overseeing the utilities and finding things they can improve on. So I'm not trying to give the impression that it's all done. But we all know that the moving an aircraft carrier takes, that first initial movement is the hardest. We're in that movement now here in California, right? It's moving, which is good. So I would say for us, it really seemed to benefit how it worked for us. I can't speak to other states of what their options are in terms of whether they want to break that out or not. But I don't necessarily think that the financing is the thing that would prevent that from happening, right? It was more the policy around how to think about focusing on safety, which, I mean, there's a financial component to it, but I wouldn't say that was the thing that enabled California to do it here. It was really the policy will that enabled California to create a separate entity.
Yeah, thank you for answering. And I think that should answer Larry's question as well. If not, Larry, in 5 minutes. I think you're on stage and can talk about this as well. But thanks for answering already. And then there might be a question that is a bit easier.
Yeah, so I see this question too. So the core authority for landscape scale resilience, forest wildfire resilience is the California Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force. So there is a website for it. If you just Google California Wildfire Task Force, you'll get the it's the first result. That is a body that has been developed. The data governance, or I'm sorry, the organizational governance of it is through an executive order. It started as our tree mortality task force almost 15 years ago. It then evolved because it was so useful in coordinating a response to the dead tree mortality issue that we were seeing move up California due to bark beetle. That then evolved to the forest task force, forest management task force, and that then evolved to the California Wildfire Forest Resilience Task Force. It has a website. The governance structure, I think I was actually just talking about it yesterday at a science forum that we had here in California. And I think the key elements that are making this task force very successful, because it's like a hot ticket in town to come to these task force meetings, is a couple of things. One, it has very clear leadership. It has executive sponsorship. It's chaired by our Secretary of Natural Resources, Wade Crowfoot, and the U.S. Forest Regional Forester. So it has direct state and federal leadership. It has administrative organizational structure. It has a few staff members. It's not huge, but there are a couple staff members that actually manage the meetings so that there's organization to it. But most importantly, they've been able to organize their meetings in a way that get people to actually get stuff done, right? So they have meetings, they come up with these action plans, and again, this is all on their website, and they have deliverables, and people work to get that thing done. And so they, over the last several years, because it's been going in this form now for just about 5 years, and like I said, when we have these quarterly meetings, because they meet quarterly, we get probably 450 people to these meetings for collaboration out in the regions across California. So it's turning into quite a successful collaboration forum because people are starting to see the impact of that collaboration.
Yeah, nice. Again, thanks for answering, Amy. I hope this answers your question fully. And then looking at the time, I think we have time for one other question coming from Steve, who was on stage before you started talking.
Oh.
So maybe he missed it up front.
No, I didn't talk too much about those. So WSAB, what that is for everybody else, Wildfire Safety Advisory Board. So part of the regulatory, I didn't go deep in the regulatory structure that we implement, but part of the regulatory structure, as I mentioned in the talk, the key impetus here was move fast and do meaningful things, right? Get the investment to actually make a difference. And to, as I mentioned, that we had to learn stuff, right? Like we were doing this and it hadn't really been done before. So there wasn't a lot. We couldn't just go copy what other people were doing. We had to come up with new ideas. So as part of that regulatory framework, the statute that created us, the law that created us, also created a Wildfire Safety Advisory Board that is made up of technical experts. So it actually defines different technical expertise that it wants on that board. And that board advises energy safety and can give us recommendations on how to solve complex technical problems. In addition, so that's really useful and helpful. So veg management is a big area where they offer a lot of expertise. Risk modeling is an area where they offer a lot of expertise. In addition, we have 9 investor-owned utilities, electrical utilities here in California, but we have 50 publicly owned utilities, electrical cooperatives. And so they review the WMPs, the Wildfire Mitigation Plans, for these publicly owned utilities, because we don't have regulatory oversight of the POUs, we call them, publicly owned utilities. But the board, while they don't necessarily have approval authority over them, they don't approve their plans, they do receive the plans and they do provide advisory opinions on how those POUs could potentially improve their plans. So the WSAB, Wildfire Safety Advisory Board, has 2 main functions: advice to our department, as well as advice to POUs on their WMPs.
Nice, thank you. And I'm marking that as answered as well. And then again, looking at the time, I think we we finished spot on. Thank you so much for holding this keynote. I think it was really interesting for the audience, again, for people obviously working for Californian utilities, but also I think the insights you mentioned are valuable to others. Me being a German or European, I can definitely see that we have similar issues, not in Germany, but in especially in the south of Europe, right? So if people are listening from over there, again, very valuable insights. Thank you so much for taking the time. And
yeah, thank you. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you all. And anyone here that's listening, please know that my door is always open. You can find me on LinkedIn. And we're really happy to share what we've learned over these last several years. We also are always open to learning from others. Like, we don't think we always have all the answers. So especially as more people start thinking about this, it's really enriching for us to hear different perspectives and maybe new ways that we could be doing things better. So please feel free to reach out at any time.
Nice. Awesome. See you in the next session, everyone.
Well, there we have it. So that was the first of the 6-part series from the Grid Resilience Summit. And thanks again to LiveEO, who put together this summit and were gracious enough to invite Steve and I to host the summit itself. So, any thoughts, comments, Steve, before we wrap things up for today?
Yeah, no, I'd just like to say something I think we'll say at the end of all of these videos. If you enjoyed that video, please subscribe to the YouTube station. Feel free to reach out to either Nick or myself with any comments, concerns, questions. And we look forward to entering a new era with the UVM podcast of doing more video productions in the future. Apologies for having to look at me. Nick, you're such a stud. People love to look at you. But thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And I hope you enjoyed it, everyone. If you do have any suggestions for future topics, then just write us an email to podcast@utilityvegetationmanagement.com and we'll make it happen. So, and tune in for episode 2 from the Grid Resilience Summit.
Like, share, and subscribe.
There we go. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.